They laughed when I walked out. They didn't know. I was walking away with everything. My name is Mallory Hayes. I'm 31 years old. And this is how I turned their betrayal into my blueprint for power. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell me where you're listening from in the comments. The violin started too early. That's the first thing I notice. One sharp, misplaced note sliced through the velvet hush of the ceremony, spaced thin, trembling, and wrong. It hung there, like a secret slipping out too soon. Then the others joined, swelling into a practiced symphony of sweetness, but the rhythm was off. Too eager, too polished, like they were trying too hard to sound flawless. A camera flash split the room like lightning. Someone coughed, sharp and nervous, and I inhaled. The scent of white roses was thick in the air, too much, cloying against the delicate burn of vanilla candles and the faint fizz of open champagne bottles waiting on silver trays near the exit. The mix was intoxicating, luxurious, suffocating. I took one step, then another. My ivory satin heels made no sound on the carpeted runner, but my heartbeat refused to hide. It knocked against my ribs like a trapped thing desperate to be heard. My gown custom Vera Wang, hand-stitched pearls trailing like frost shifted around my legs, whispering with each movement. It felt heavy, not just from fabric, but from everything it represented. Every lie, every promise, every secret sewn into it. Seems. And then I saw him, standing at the altar. Waiting. Colton. His smile was dazzling. Rehearsed. Like this was everything he'd ever wanted, like this was real, but it wasn't. Not for him, and maybe not for me either. He looked like a man out of a magazine. Spread clean jawline, tailored tux, eyes bright with performance. He was always good at playing roles. The devoted fiancé, the charming son, the steady hand everyone could count on. That smile of his could fool anyone. It had fooled me once. Now I just watched. As I approached, I caught the subtle twitch of his jaw. Not nerves, never nerves with him. That was the look he got when he was calculating, rearranging the pieces of the board in his mind. The same expression he wore when he'd tell me something awful but frame it like a favor. It's for the best, he'd say, and I'd nod, pretending not to taste the poison under the sugar. To his left stood Heather. My bridesmaid. My best friend since high school. The girl who once slept on my couch through breakups, cried into my shoulder over men who didn't deserve her, and now here she was, standing beside mine. She held my bouquet of peonies and baby's breath. Her hands trembled slightly. Her makeup was perfect, but her eyes betrayed her. They were rimmed with fatigue, as if she hadn't slept. Or maybe she had, but in the wrong bed. I told the planner to seat everyone close together. Tight rows. No aisle gaps. No clear paths out. It was a subtle choice, one I'd insisted on. I wanted everyone there, every witness to what was about to happen. No one leaving early. No one slipping away unseen. As I moved through the aisle, heads turned in slow, synchronized motion. The familiar faces of two families stitched together by pretense. My aunts from Kansas, smiling too wide. Colton's fraternity brothers whispering jokes behind polite grins. His mother polished, brittle, and already hiding her stainless steel flask in the clutch I gave her as a peace offering. Lifted it discreetly to her lips. The orchestra's volume rose, filling the vaulted ceilings with elegant pressure, but all I could hear was my pulse, because I wasn't looking at their faces. I was watching his hands, steady, confident, still wearing the Rolex I'd bought him last Christmas. The same one that had mysteriously gone missing in April. He'd told me it needed repairs. He'd been so convincing. I'd even believed him until I found the receipt, and it wasn't for repairs. It was for a hotel room. He extended his hand toward me, fingers open. The perfect gentleman, and I took it. His palm was dry, cold, lifeless. The minister smiled, like we were a painting bride and groom framed in perfection. Behind us, the stained glass windows from the 1800s spilled fractured light across the aisle. The colors flickered over my dress, gold, crimson, deep blue, like the room itself was holding its breath. Everything looked flawless. Every flower, every polished marble column. Every guest pretending this was the happiest day of our lives. Everything perfect, except the way he looked at her when he thought I wasn't watching, except the way she looked back, tight-lipped, guilty, terrified. I smiled too, wider, because they had no idea, no idea that I'd seen the messages, no idea that I'd been rehearsing this moment for weeks. The photographer's shutter clicked again, capturing us in that perfect frame, me glowing, him radiant. A picture that would outlive the truth. The guests saw a fairy tale. But beneath the silken light, something darker pulsed. The officiant began to speak. Voice low and ceremonious. I barely heard him. My gaze lingered on Colton's cufflink, the one engraved with his initials CDM and the tiny scratch on its edge. When I'd left myself, when I found it on the floor beside her purse, Heather swallowed hard, adjusting the bouquet, and for a second, our eyes met. Her lips parted like she wanted to speak, to confess, to apologize. I held her gaze, steady and calm, and she looked away. Her knuckles tightened around the flowers until the petals bruised. The music softened. The officiant smiled. Colton squeezed my fingers gently, like a man deeply in love, but his touch felt like frost. "You look beautiful," he whispered under his breath, barely moving his lips. I smiled. "I know." A ripple of laughter moved through the audience, as if sensing the charm between us. They couldn't hear the undertone. They couldn't see the current shifting beneath the still surface. But I could. I could feel it in every nerve of my body. He was performing for them, and so was I. Two actors, reading lines we both knew by heart, except I'd rewritten the ending. The minister continued, words rising and falling in practiced cadence. Phrases about love, devotion, and unity. I let them wash over me like background noise. My mind drifted instead to the weeks before this day, to the whispers in the hallway when I walked in too soon, to the late-night texts that disappeared when I reached for his phone, to the faint smell of Heather's perfume on his jacket, and then to the moment I found the receipt, one crumpled slip of paper, folded into the lining of his coat, a hotel name I recognized, a date that matched the night he said he was working late. That's when I stopped crying. That's when I started planning now. Here we were, in front of everyone, and every move, every breath, every trembling violin note was exactly how I wanted it. Colton's smile never faltered. He leaned slightly closer as the minister invited us to recite our vows. The air between us tightened. I could feel Heather's presence like static, standing too close, her breathing uneven. She avoided my eyes. I repeated the words, each syllable tasting of ash and clarity. He followed, confident, calm, and when he said "I do," his voice didn't shake. He really thought he was getting away with it. That's when I looked at her again. Her fingers trembled. Her mascara glimmered under the light, threatening to smudge. She looked sick. Good. Because the ceremony wasn't just for us. It was for them to stand there, side by side, trapped by tradition and guilt. Under the eyes of everyone they lied to, the minister nodded, satisfied. And now the rings? A pause. The best man, Colton's college friend, stepped forward, fumbling in his pocket. The orchestra swelled again, slow and syrupy. The light from the stained glass bathed Colton's face in color crimson across his cheek, gold in his hair. He took the ring from the velvet box. His fingers were steady, his expression flawless, but as he turned it in his palm, something flickered behind his eyes. A moment of hesitation. He didn't know yet. Not what I had done, not what I had carved into the inside of that band. Heather's breathing hitched. She must have remembered. I smiled again, calm. Patient. My heart was thunder in my ears, but my face was peace. He wanted a fairy tale. He was about to get the ending. No one saw coming. The violins reached their crescendo. The guests leaned forward, phones ready, and I lifted my hand. He slipped the ring onto my finger. For a second, everything froze, the music, the murmurs, the breath of the crowd. The air itself seemed to hold still. Then his eyes caught the engraving, and his face turned white. He blinked once. Then again, Heather's hand went to her mouth, and I smiled, because that was the moment all began to unravel. Heather's heels clicked too quickly behind me when we entered the venue that morning. The sound echoed. against the marble floor of the bridal suite. Hallway sharp, nervous, and out of rhythm with the quiet hum of string instruments tuning in the main hall. The kind of sound that didn't belong in a place built for poise. "Heather," I called without turning around. "Slow down. You're making me anxious." She laughed, a brittle, too bright sound. "Sorry, these floors are slippery." But I heard it. That edge in her voice. The same tremor that used to give her away when we were teenagers sneaking out after curfew. The same one she had the night she told me she'd lost her mother's necklace, and later, I found it in her purse. She'd never been good at lying. Not to me anyway. "Heather, you okay? You barely touched your mimosa." Her reflection hovered behind mine in the vanity mirror. All soft curls, pale blush, perfect skin. She looked like the version of herself she always wanted to be. But her eyes gave her away. Me, just pacing myself. "Big day." I smiled into the mirror, the kind of smile that didn't reach my eyes. The kind I practiced in the weeks leading up to this. Heather leaned closer. Her perfume, something floral and synthetic, wrapping around me like a veil. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, that same towel she'd had since high school. Back then, it was cute, innocent. Now, it was like watching someone rehearse guilt. I'd known Heather since we were 15. Cheer practice. Algebra, cafeteria lunches we swore were cursed. We'd whispered secrets under the bleachers. Cried over the same heartbreaks. Learned to drive in the same old sedan that smelled like cherry gum and spilled coffee. We graduated together, roomed together after college, celebrated promotions, breakups, birthdays. Everything. She'd been there when my father died. She'd been there when I met Colton. She'd even been the one to tell me he was different. That he was the one I could finally trust. So it should have felt comforting. Her brushing imaginary lint from my veil, smoothing the lace like she always did before big moments. But it didn't. It felt choreographed, like she wasn't fixing it for me. She was fixing it for the cameras, for the story, for the audience watching this performance unfold. And Colton? He hadn't answered my text all night. The night before your wedding, you'd think your fiancé would want to talk. To check in. To tell you he couldn't sleep because he was too excited to marry you. But my phone stayed silent. When I called, it went straight to voicemail. When I texted, the little delivered bubble appeared instantly but never turned into read. When I asked him about it that morning, he kissed my forehead, too casually, too soft, and said, "Colton, wasn't good service at Brian's place? You know how it is." His tone was relaxed, but his eyes darted once, left, then right, before he smiled again. He was lying. The same way he did when he said he'd be home by 9 and showed up at midnight, smelling like Heather's perfume. I didn't say anything. Not then. I just nodded, memorizing the cadence of his excuse, because I'd already checked the call log. Too outgoing. Calls after midnight. Both to Heather. That was the first. Crack, hairline, invisible to everyone else. But to me, it might as well have been a fault line running through the day. The second came an hour later. In the bridal suite, I was double-checking the table numbers when I noticed the ring. Box on the dresser. It wasn't the one we picked together. The antique velvet box from the jeweler downtown. The one wrapped in ivory ribbon, faintly scented with sandalwood. This one was new, shiny, plastic, branded with a modern logo embossed in silver foil. And when I lifted the lid, the ring inside caught the light. Wrong. It was beautiful. But not mine. Different cut. Different setting. Different everything. My throat tightened. I asked him, trying to keep my voice even. Me, did you switch the box? He didn't even hesitate. Colton. Oh yeah. The old one felt dusty. This one's sleeker. You like it, right? He smiled, that boyish, charming grin he used when he wanted to steer attention away from something, but his eyes never met mine. He looked past me, over my shoulder, at something I couldn't see. And for a brief second, I wondered if he was imagining her standing there instead, back at the altar, time blurred. The crowd shifted. The music softened to something sentimental. I tried to focus on the minister's voice, but his words turned into static because Heather was moving again. Subtly, but I saw it. Her shifting weight, her fingers twitching against the bouquet, her eyes flickering downward like they wanted to disappear. Colton kept glancing at her hand. Once, then again. The kind of glance that meant something had already been shared. So I followed his gaze. Her nails were unpolished, clean, but there, faint pale, was a small indentation. A mark where a ring used to be. The breath caught in my throat. 2 nights ago, Heather had been sitting on my bedroom floor, helping me unpack the wedding favors. I remember her laughing, her hair tied up, her hands busy with ribbons. I'd noticed the ring missing then. She said her finger was swollen from stress, that she took it off for a facial. I believed her, because that's what best friends do. They believe the easy lies to avoid asking the hard questions. But now that small mark glared at me like proof burned into skin. I swallowed hard, forcing my face to stay still. Every second felt like a performance. Every smile like an act of endurance. The minister kept talking about love and devotion, words that sounded holy but felt hollow, and my mind drifted back. 3 weeks ago, I'd lost the ring receipt. Or rather, Colton said he lost it, claimed it slipped out of his wallet at the gym. I'd shrugged it off at first. Mistakes happen. But later, while syncing his laptop to the printer, I saw an email pop up in the corner of his screen. Subject line, confirming pickup for the custom band engraved inside. Thanks again. It was addressed to a different jeweler, one we hadn't used. The email was polite, professional, precise, and it mentioned a pickup. Time 2 days before our anniversary dinner. The same night he said he'd been working late. When I asked him about it, he didn't blink. Colton must have been spam. You know how these stores are? Always cross-selling, always sending junk. I'd smiled and nodded like a fool, but the pit in my stomach didn't believe him. Later that night, I searched the jeweler's name. It was real, small, boutique, specialized in custom engraving. One requested a copy of the invoice using his email address. They sent it within minutes. And there it was, a line item that made my blood run cold. Inside engraving, to my love age. I printed the invoice, folded it twice, slipped it into my clutch. Just in case. I told myself I needed proof, but deep down, I already knew. As the minister reached the word commitment, I let my gaze sweep the room. Rows of faces, painted smiles, watching, judging, pretending they were witnessing a love story. Some smiled, soft and teary, some didn't. My mother sat like marble, perfect posture, polite expression, pretending not to notice that I hadn't looked at her once. She'd always valued appearances over truth. Colton's father, seated 2 rows back, tugged at his tie again and again. The movement was small but constant, like he knew something was wrong but couldn't name it. The room felt like a pressure cooker, the air thick with unspoken things. Every breath shallow, every second stretched too long, and I was the only one who knew it was about to blow. I leaned slightly toward him, voice low enough for only him to hear. Me, do you have the ring? He hesitated, just for a beat, then reached into his pocket and nodded, smile still frozen in place. Heather's eyes flickered. She looked away, pretending to adjust the bouquet, but her hand trembled. The petals shook. That was all I needed. I steadied my breath, bit the inside of my cheek, a small pain to anchor myself in the storm. The taste of iron grounded me. Then I smiled, slow, serene, because the real ceremony hadn't started. Yet, not the one that anyone else could see, not the one that would rewrite everything. And as the orchestra swelled again, I lifted my chin, ready for what came next. The ring glinted beneath the chandelier as Colton opened the box. The entire room leaned forward, like they could all feel the weight of that small, polished lie. He took my hand. His fingers trembled barely, but I felt it. He'd never been nervous around me before. He'd always been smooth, confident, a little too sure of himself. Now, the mask cracked. The minister smiled. Repeat after me. Colton, with this ring, I give you my... He stopped. His brow creased. He tilted the band, squinting. And that's when I saw it too. The engraving. It caught the light, just enough for me to read the first 4 letters. A name that didn't belong to me, to my love. Anna. For a second, I thought I'd misread it. Maybe the gold warped under the light. Maybe it said Mallory in some twisted reflection, but then the gasp sharp collective rippled through the crowd. Heather's face went pale. Colton's lips parted. Sound lost. The minister froze. Silence. The kind that hums. I didn't flinch. Not once. I just held his gaze until his voice cracked into the microphone. Colton, it's just a mistake. They must have engraved it wrong. Heather stepped back, clutching her bouquet like it was a shield. I could see her throat move, a hard swallow, a tremor in her jaw. Me. Who's Anna? He blinked. Once. Twice. Then stammered. It's not what you think. Me. Say her name again. His breath hitched. Mallory, please. But I wasn't Mallory anymore. Not to him. I was the consequence he never thought would show up wearing white. The guest whispered, phones tilted up. Every camera flash was a confession. I turned to the minister. Me. You can stop the ceremony now. The man hesitated. Ma'am, me, please. It's over. Then I looked back at Colton. And I smiled, because for the first time in months, he looked small. Heather's bouquet slipped from her hand, pink petals scattered like confetti across the aisle. Perfect timing. I bent down, lifted one petal between my fingers, and whispered just loud enough for him to hear. Me, you should have checked the engraving. He reached for me, panic finally catching up to pride. Colton, Mallory, don't do this. Not here. But the thing is, this was exactly where I wanted to do it, right? Here. Right now. In front of everyone who ever thought he was the hero, because I didn't come to marry him. I came to end him. The chandelier threw prisms across the marble. The pastor spoke on, but my ears tuned only to my breathing. Slow, deliberate. Faces blurred around me. People leaned forward like they had been waiting for a crack in the picture frame to appear. Aunt June gasped. A cousin filmed on their phone. Colton's mother clutched her clutch like a lifeline. Pressure is a useful thing. It forces cracks into view. I stepped back down the aisle. Not running. Not pleading. Moving with a deliberate calm that made people watch harder. Camera flashes pop, pop, pop. Whispers slipped through rows like paper boats. You should have checked the engraving. I said again, louder. Colton's face went through a dozen small deaths. He tried to speak, but the words came out thin. They said, he began. They said nothing. I cut in. You told them what to write? The priest tried to smooth things. Perhaps we can, he started. No, I said. You will tell everyone the ceremony is suspended. The reception is postponed. No one leaves? Not yet. I wanted witnesses. I wanted the truth to stay where it landed. Heather flinched. Her bouquet hung limp now, petals scattered. She looked smaller than the bridesmaid dress she'd chosen. For a second, I remembered the girl she used to be. It made the betrayal feel sharper. Colton's father moved, uncertain, reaching out to steady a world that was wobbling. Mallory, he said, soft. Please. Your son lied, I said. And he dragged me into it. That stopped things. People shifted, unsure whether to sympathize with me or with their friend. It's strange how quickly alliances worry themselves into knots when the comfortable narrative unravels. Phones recorded. Some faces softened, others hardened. The minister cleared his throat and made the slow, awkward announcement. A hush descended like a curtain being pulled. Ceremony suspended, he said, voice trembling. Chairs scraped as the room processed the instruction. I walked back to the altar because I needed the stage. The name Anna shone like accusation when the light hit the ring. I held the box open, made them look at the lie we'd all been asked to believe. You knew, I said to them both. You both knew. You let me walk into this. Colton sagged on the pew behind him. His composure shredded. He looked to Heather, desperate. She mouthed something, sorry, maybe, but her eyes kept darting away. You could have left, I told them. But you chose deceit. He tried the old pleading lines. I love you. The crowd softened for a beat. Love is a powerful weapon. People forgive when they hear it. But not tonight. You ruined me, I said evenly. You didn't ruin my dress. You ruined my trust. He crumpled into himself as if the weight of that sentence were a physical thing he couldn't carry. A sob from the back, someone's aunt, made the room break into small pieces of noise. Heather stepped forward, trembling. "It was a mistake," she whispered. "A mistake?" I echoed. "A mistake involves one slip." This was orchestration, calls, invoices, secrecy. She had no words left after that. Just a small sound that might have been regret. I walked out. Not running. Not staging some melodrama. I left with the ring heavy on my finger, and the blueprint for what came next already forming in my head. The press of the moment had cleared the room. My mind made space for plans. Outside, the sky waited like a neutral witness. The car smelled faintly of leather and something Colton had left behind. I closed the door and let the engine take me away. I sat in the car for a long minute, letting the engine idle while my mind rewound the last few months. Details arranged themselves into patterns, hotel names, texts that vanished from his phone when I stood too close, the flimsy excuses that always had a careful cadence. Betrayal is a choreography. You notice the steps only after you've learned the routine. People think the moment of discovery is explosive, the scream, the fight, the collapsing of a life. But for me, it was precise. A cold burn that made everything crystalline. I felt an odd gratitude in that clarity. When things are clean, you can plan. When they are messy, you panic. My hand kept turning the band. Anna. The 4 letters were a brand, no proof, not rumor. Somewhere inside the reception hall, a clock ticked on, indifferent. The priest was likely telling anyone who would listen that we'd do what we could to be discreet. Colton's father probably wanted to call his lawyer. Heather maybe thought about how she'd tell her mother. All of them scrambling to arrange the aftermath. I admired the urgency. I would use it. Revenge, people assume, is loud. They imagined schemes with dramatic reveals and shouted confessions. That's for novels. Real undoing is quieter. It's paperwork and timing. It's conversations that nudge people where you want them, little legal knots tied in the corners. It's closing bank accounts while his attention is elsewhere. It's making sure the narrative people assume is the truth becomes inconvenient for him to maintain. For weeks, I had collected things. Receipts, invoices, small admissions hidden in messages. Evidence is not glamorous. It is patient. It waits until you are ready. And now I was ready. I thought about the guests, how they would retell the story, how they'd choose sides. Public opinion is both blade and shield. Use it correctly and it cuts away power. Misuse it and it becomes a hangman's noose that takes you down with the accused. I intended to be careful. When I finally stepped out of the car, the air felt like a cool editor. My phone buzzed, my mother checking in, someone asking, "Is everything okay?" And I answered with a composed line, "We need time." "I'm fine." The lie was useful. People panic at panic. Calmness unsettles them more. Inside the venue, conversations folded into pockets. The reception chairs had been cleared into knots of whispers, and the caterers moved like ghosts, unsure whether to open bottles or retreat. A cousin came up to me, eyes wet. "Mallory," he began, but I cut him off kindly with a hand on his arm. "It's okay. I'll talk soon." I walked by the table where the invoices had been laid out. Little orange tags of evidence waiting to be picked up. The jeweler's receipt burned in my clutch like a secret flame. I would need to make copies. I would need to choose the right moment to introduce them. Not here, not now. Strategy demanded patience. Colton stood with his head bowed, surrounded by a protective circle of friends. They were trying to prop him up with words. "Hang in there. We've got you." But their eyes betrayed them, darting to me as if searching for instruction. People are social animals. Loyalty is often performative. When the signal shifts, so does the pact. Heather watched from a distance, small and backlit. I had loved her once, like a sister. She was the person who had helped me pick flowers and stay sane during vendor meltdowns. But companionship is conditional, and the cost had been my trust. Grief and anger are close cousins. Time would show which dominated my heart. Right now, anger felt cleaner. I made a list on the back of an envelope in the car, bank statements to request. The transfer I'd noticed the month before, the login email for shared accounts. The lawyer I'd consulted months prior about a hypothetical separation clause. She had recommended caution, then always have your ducks in a row, she'd said. I had smiled and pretended it was worry. I had been taking notes. When I returned to the great hall, the guests had settled into an uneasy lull. The minister murmured apologies. Colton's mother had something white in her hand tissues, her fingers trembling. People were repositioning themselves into roles they felt comfortable with again. Consolers, spectators, busybodies. I let them think I was fragile. The ruse is effective. It draws confidences. People drop their guard around people they pity. Over the next few days, those confidences would be tools. The rest of the night blurred in a fog of short conversations and long silences. I ate very little. I let others talk. I listened. In the end, the best revenge uses other people's words against them. And in this room, there were plenty of words. By midnight, the steam had cooled. Colton's father had arranged for close family to speak privately. He'd look for damage control. I expected it, but I had plans that were not contingent on his approval. I went home alone. The apartment felt like a map with a missing piece. I spread out the receipts, the emails, and the little paper trail I'd assembled. It was not a bomb. It was scaffolding. Carefully placed, it would support whatever came next. That night, I slept in the dress. Not because of stubbornness, but because somehow sleeping with the fabric on kept the moment close, tangible. Dreams were thin, bright, full of ledger lines and quiet triumphs. When morning came, I started making calls. Small moves. A freeze here, a notice there. I made them when he was still dizzy from public exposure. That's when people are most vulnerable, right after they're unmasked. The law moves slowly when it's boring. It moves quickly when someone's reputation is on the line. I intended to take advantage of both tempos. I didn't need to raise my voice. I just needed to speak clearly. The words came out smooth. Steady, not trembling, not frantic. I wanted them to slice cleanly. Like glass breaking in slow motion. Me. Since we've already gathered, I'd like to say a few words. The minister's lips parted, uncertain. Then quietly he stepped back. The quartet stopped mid-measure, the violin bow frozen in midair. The cellist's fingers still pressing down on a trembling string, even the baby in the third row, who had been fussing since the ceremony began, went perfectly still. Sound itself seemed to retreat from the room. Colton froze with his hand half extended, palm open like he was still offering me something, a promise. Maybe, but even he didn't know what anymore. His jaw worked, a pulse jumping just beneath the skin. His eyes scanning the room like he was searching for an exit that didn't exist. Heather's eyes darted toward the side doors, the service corridor that led back to the kitchens. I caught the flicker of her movement before she stopped. Herself, she didn't move. She knew she couldn't. I reached into my clutch. Slow and deliberate, the sound of the clasp clicking open echoed like a gun being cocked. Every gaze followed. From that tiny, glittering purse, I pulled a single folded sheet of paper, thin, creased. Familiar. The weight of proof. I unfolded it carefully, smoothing the edges with steady hands. Me. This is a copy of the invoice from Bordeaux and Sons Jewelry in Nashville. My voice carried cleanly across the room. Low but resonant. Even the chandeliers seemed to tremble with the echo. Me. It stated 2 weeks ago. The band ordered a custom rose gold setting, engraved with the words, "To my love, Anna." Gasps followed, sharp, collective, like the air had been punched out of the room. A hand flew to someone's mouth. Someone else whispered, "Oh my God." Colton's mother dropped her champagne flute. The sound of shattering crystal rippled through the silence like a gunshot. The liquid spread across the marble in a glimmering arc, bubbling at her feet. I didn't blink. Me. I'm not Anna. A pause. Thick. Vibrating with tension. Then I turned slowly, deliberately, to the guests, row by row, face by face. Every eye found mine. Every mouth went still. Me. Some of you flew in from Michigan. Some of you left work early. Some of you wore heels to sit through this show. I lifted the paper higher, steady as a judge holding the verdict. Me. So I thought you deserved to know the truth. I pivoted slightly. locking eyes with the bridesmaid beside me, Heather.me. She's Anna. For a second, there was silence. Then the smallest strangled sound came from Heather. That's not true. But the crack in her voice betrayed her before the words finished. Her cheeks flushed red. Her throat worked hard, and I knew, everyone knew. She was lying. Colton, Mallory. Stop, please. The plea hit the air like a desperate whisper against a hurricane.me. Stop. I started walking toward him. Not fast. Not angry. Just calm. Controlled. The way you walk toward a door you're about to lock for the last time.me. You lied. You cheated. You planned a whole wedding as a cover story so your family wouldn't suspect. He stepped back, instinctive, his polished shoes squeaking faintly against the runner.me. You called it timing. I let the word hang, then, with a faint, bitter smile, I call it cowardice. The audience shifted, the sound of rustling fabric filling the silence. Colton's smile, that perfectly trained, charming smile, was gone. His lips parted, but nothing came out. His breath was shallow, audible through the microphone clipped to his lapel. I reached for my phone. My fingers didn't tremble. I tapped once. The screen lit up, casting a cold blue light across my face. On the display, a still frame from my apartment's hallway. Cam. Colton. Leaving at 2:13 a.m. Heather just behind him, zipping her hoodie. You could see his head turn toward her. That same secret smile he used to give me before everything changed. Turned the phone toward the crowd.me. That was 3 nights ago. Silence again, even heavier now. No one moved. Even the planner, usually the embodiment of control, stood frozen near the back wall. The chefs by the doors, their trays trembling slightly, didn't move. The minister took an involuntary step forward, his hand half raised as if to restore order. But I met his gaze before he spoke. He stopped. I handed him the phone. He took it gingerly, like it might burn through his skin. He didn't meet my eyes, just held the evidence, my truth, between two trembling fingers. Then I turned back to Colton.me. You should have been honest. Colton, it didn't mean anything. It was just a mistake, the old excuses. The tired script. How many times had he rehearsed that line in his head? Me, you engraved a mistake? That shut him up. A murmur passed through the guests like wind through leaves. Disbelief. Pity. Fascination. Heather swayed slightly, her face white as her bouquet. For a second, I thought she might faint. I hoped she wouldn't. No. I wanted her awake. Conscious. Fully aware of every second she'd earned.me. You stole time from me. I could feel my pulse steady, my voice low but cutting. Love, trust, future I actually believed in. The truth wasn't angry anymore. It was tired. Cold. Solid. I adjusted my veil, smoothed the edge of it down my shoulder with 2 fingers. Slow and deliberate, the lace brushed against my wrist, soft. Steadying.me. But I'm not here to beg for closure. I looked out over the guests, all those eyes, all those silent witnesses.me. I made sure I already had it. And for the first time, I let myself exhale. The performance was over. The illusion shattered. He wanted a stage, a story, a perfect ending. So I gave him one. The minister lowered his head. Heather's hands shook until the bouquet slipped again, petals scattering across the floor like pieces of the lie they built together. Someone in the back whispered, "Oh my God," but no one dared to move. Colton looked smaller now, his posture deflated, his shoulders sinking under the weight of exposure. For a man who prided himself on control, he had none left, and I felt lighter than I had in months. My words had become the final vows neither of us expected. Not promises of forever, but declarations of ending. He opened his mouth once more, maybe to beg, maybe to apologize, but I lifted my hand slightly, palm out, and he stopped there. In that chapel filled with white roses and wasted champagne, everything went still again. It was the most honest silence of my life. I took a breath, not a shaky one, not the kind that trembles through your ribs. A steady breath, the kind that comes when you've already burned through every ounce. of fear and found something colder underneath. Then I reached into my clutch one last time. This time, it wasn't paper dot, it was the envelope dot cream. Heavy, embossed, sealed with a notary's stamp. The gold edges catching the chandelier light as if it still wanted to be beautiful. Me. This is the marriage license application. A ripple of movement passed through the room, heads turning, whispers colliding. I held it up high, letting it catch the light. The hush that followed felt almost reverent. Me. Blank, unfiled, unsubmitted. A murmur swept the guests. Confusion first, then realization. Colton blinked. Slow and mechanical, like a man waking up mid-dream. Heather whispered something, too low for anyone else to hear, but whatever it was made him flinch. His shoulders tightening as though he'd been struck. Me. I never filed it. My voice was even now, detached. Not once. Not even after your mother called to rush me. Not after you sent me calendar reminders. The crowd leaned in, holding their breath. Me, because deep down, I knew. The words landed soft, but sharp enough to cut. I stepped forward, the fabric of my dress gliding over marble like water spilling down a cliff. Every heel click echoed. Rhythmic, deliberate. Me, there's no marriage today. Not legally. Not emotionally. Just a performance. One that ends right now. The gasp this time wasn't just surprise, it was release. Collective exhale from a crowd that had been holding its breath since the first violin note hours ago. For some, it sounded like relief. For others, like shame. I let it settle. Then I reached back into my clutch and pulled out another folded paper. This one crisp. White, official. Looking. Me, the venue. I looked around, letting my eyes sweep across the room. The candles. The floral arch, the photographer frozen behind her lens. Booked under my company. Someone near the front tilted their head. Confused, Colton's brow furrowed. I pointed slowly, deliberately, to the servers by the buffet, the camera crew near the aisle, the florist nervously adjusting her ribbon near the altar. Me, every contract, every invoice, every signature. Mine. A slow murmur spread like wind moving through dry leaves. I let them feel it. The quiet humiliation blooming in Colton's chest as the reality rearranged itself around him. Me. That's why it was so easy to cancel the photographer's post-ceremony schedule. I smiled faintly. And why the catering ends in 5 minutes. A few guests turned their heads instinctively, and a server at the back actually checked his watch. Uncertain whether I was joking, I wasn't. The air shifted. Uneasy laughter bubbled up somewhere, then died fast. Colton's mother stood halfway between outrage and fear, maybe to speak, maybe to run. Her chair scraped against the floor. A harsh metallic sound that cut through the quiet. I didn't look at her. I didn't care. Me. You used this day to cover a lie. I paused, holding his gaze. I used it to expose it. The words landed with precision. He recoiled like they were physical. Colton stepped toward me then, desperate, his face a collage of disbelief and panic. Colton, Mallory, please listen. We can talk. This isn't how we fix things. I tilted my head. Slow. Calm. Me. You don't fix things that never existed. The room went utterly still. Even the chandeliers seemed to dim, as though the electricity itself was afraid to interrupt. Heather was crying now, not the loud, dramatic kind of crying people do when they still want sympathy. This was smaller, raw, the kind that comes when you realize the story's over and there's no rewriting it. Her shoulders trembled. Mascara streaked faintly down her cheek, a dark reminder of the hours she'd spent pretending to be pure. Good. Me. She smiled like I was the joke. I looked between them. I made sure I was the punchline instead. A few of Colton's fraternity friends shifted in their seats, unsure whether to look at him or at me. No one spoke. I turned toward the guests, the crowd that had come expecting a love story and instead got an autopsy. Me. Thank you all for coming. My voice softened, almost warm. Your presence made this the most honest wedding I've ever seen. Somewhere near the back, someone stifled a nervous laugh that turned into a cough. The sound echoed strangely. the only thing that moved in a room full of statues. Then I turned. Step dot, then another dot, no bouquet dot, no groom dot, no music dot, just the hollow, echoing rhythm of my heels on the marble floor and the faint, fragile crunch of rose petals crushed beneath them. Dot, the runner, white, pristine that morning, was now streaked with petals and champagne. It looked like the battlefield after a masquerade. Dot, no one tried to stop me. Dot, no one dared. I could feel their eyes on my back, hundreds of them, burning with a mixture of pity and awe. But I didn't look back. Not yet. I reached the great oak doors, the ones we were supposed to walk through hand in hand. I rested my fingers on the handle, feeling the chill of the metal. Dot, and then I paused. Dot, just once. The weight of silence filled the room again. I turned. He was still standing there, tie undone. Dot, face pale, ring box hanging limply from his hand like an afterthought. Dot, he looked like a man caught between disbelief and ruin. I studied him. The man I thought I'd marry, now stripped of every illusion he'd ever worn. I smiled. Dot, me. He wanted a perfect wedding, a beat. He got a perfect ending. I let the words hang in the air, final and merciless. Before I pushed open the door, light spilled in, bright, golden. Almost too much after the dim chandeliers. Dot, it poured over my dress, turning the beads and silk into armor. I walked through it without looking back again. Outside, the air smelled of spring and rain, clean, alive, free. For the first time all day, I felt like I could breathe. The world hadn't ended. Dot, it had just begun again. Behind me, the murmur of chaos rose, a swirl of questions, apologies, embarrassment. I didn't need to hear it. I'd already won. Dot, the wind tugged gently at my veil, lifting it like a ghost before letting it go. Dot, it slipped from my hair and drifted away, carried toward the garden. I didn't chase it, let it go, let it all go. Stepped off the marble path and onto the gravel drive, the sound beneath my heels changing from echo to crunch, sharp, grounding, real. Dot, my car waited at the curb, the driver standing beside it with wide eyes and a half smile, as if he'd just witnessed the climax of a film he didn't understand but couldn't look away from. He opened the door without a word. I slid inside. The moment the door shut, the world outside went quiet again, muffled. Dot, peaceful. Dot, in the reflection of the window, I saw my own face, calm, composed, not victorious. Dot, not vengeful, just free. Dot, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel like someone's fiancé or someone's fool. I felt like myself. The car began to move. The venue shrank behind me, a blur of flowers and gossip and lessons learned too late for them, but right on time for me. I exhaled. Dot, slow, deliberate, a breath that belonged entirely to me. Dot, and as the sunlight streaked across the windshield, I thought, let them tell the story however they want. I already know how it ends.